Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Blair Meriden, and I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Keith Nelson, Global Head of Public Sector at Automation Anywhere, as he discusses how automating specific tasks can help reduce the risk of improper payment. Please make sure to type any questions you have in the questions panel, and Keith will address them at the end of the presentation. Keith, the floor is all yours.
Good morning, and thank you, Blair. I'll give a little bit of a background on myself. I, until recently, was a longtime member of the federal government. I worked as an acting CFO for the Department of Transportation. I've also held roles in human resources and IT in other various departments. In May, I left the federal government and joined Automation Anywhere, where it's my pleasure to look on globally in terms of public sector marketing. And I'm here today to talk about how automation, specifically intelligent automation, can help with the improper payments issues that's going on in the government worldwide, really. First, I'd like to go about the outline of what we'd like to cover today. Mentioning improper payments is not a small problem. It's racked up over $1 trillion in mistakes since 2004, and we'll get into the numbers a little bit. Then I'd like to go over public sector and automation, where the public sector is today, especially compared to some private sector organizations that have gone a little farther. Then I want to talk a little bit about Automation Anywhere, what drew me away from the public sector and into this particular company. And then I'll talk a little bit about options for getting started for those of you who are ready to move forward on this. First, I'd like to talk about the improper payments stakeholders. Since 2002, when Congress passed the Improper Payments Information Act, there have been 5 laws trying to clean up the improper payments areas. The GAO has listed it as one of the high risks. And the first law, the Improper Payments Information Act of '02, that's where they defined what an improper payment was. I'll go ahead and do that. It's those payments which, quote, should not have been made or that was made in an incorrect amount under statutory, contractual, administrative, or other legally applicable requirements. Includes any payment to an ineligible recipient, any payment for an ineligible service, any duplicate payment, payment for services not received, and any payment that does not account for credit for applicable discounts. There are 3 types of improper payments as listed. Either a monetary loss, which is an overpayment of the wrong amount or the right amount to the wrong person, and that could be unintentional or fraudulent. Then there's second category, which is non-monetary loss. This could be an underpayment, or it's the right payment to the right person, but fails to follow the applicable regulations or statutes. And the third category is unknown. There's a lack of documentation, and the government's unsure about whether the payment was proper or improper. Now, the executive branch has been just as dedicated to this issue as Congress. The president's management agenda for the last 3 presidents, Bush, Obama, and Trump, have all listed improper payments as one of the key initiatives that needed to be addressed. Obama put forth an executive order to reduce improper payments. And there have been many OMB memos, and the Council of Inspectors General has listed it as one of the top management challenges that's a government-wide effort. There is a website that OMB hosts called payment.accuracy.gov, dedicated to improper payments issues. And the bottom line is, this matters because taxpayers don't like paying money to the government and it goes out the wrong area. They want every dollar to be valued, and everybody should feel that way, and I know we all do. So, what are the results? You can see that by the numbers, since 2004, the government has identified $1.2 trillion in improper payments through 2016. And the latest trends are not good. The blues columns reflect the actual amount of improper payments year to year. And the last year reported on this chart was 144 billion. And the orange line, the ratio figure, shows that out of the total amounts of payments made, it's been about 4.7% of those payments were made improperly. So you see that trend is also rising, although it did dip down between 2009 through 13. What are the root causes of improper payments? A huge question. You'll see that the number one root cause is administrative or process errors, contributing to 34% of the problem. Closely followed by insufficient documentation to determine, those are those unknown improper payments, and an inability to authenticate eligibility. Those are huge chunks that make up a lot of the improper payments root causes. Combined, they really speak to a lack of financial controls. Which programs contribute the greatest to the improper payments? You'll see that this is a Mercatus Center chart. You'll see that the healthcare, specifically Medicare and Medicaid, contribute more than 50% of the improper payments of dollar amounts. And you can see that the list of the programs on here have all been identified by the Office of Management and Budget as contributing at least $750 million in improper payments a year. So they're considered high error programs. And I'll give a couple of examples flagged looking underneath these figures. $1 billion in FY16 flowed to dead people, either through Social Security benefits or Medicare and Medicaid payments. College students were overpaid by $6 billion in Pell Grants and student loans. Social Security recipients were overpaid by $10 billion. And one little notation is that 6 million active Social Security numbers belong to people aged 112 or older. And the problem with that is there's only 40 people in the world that are aged 112 or older. And finally, 18.4 billion went in earned income tax credit overpayments, which translates to about $1 in overpayment out of every $4 to beneficiaries. Even though this is a ton of money, with few exceptions, it's simply too expensive and time-consuming to chase down the overpayments to individual recipients. You can take the $1, the $10, the $100 rules, which is it costs $1 to verify the accuracy of data at the point of entry, it costs $10 to correct or clean it up in a batch form, and it costs $100 per record if nothing is done. So because it's inefficient to chase down the payments after they're made, the smarter angle is to not make the improper payment in the first place. And that brings us to the public sector and automation. I'm going to shift gears and tell you a little bit about where automation is today in the public sector, and then we'll bring these two issues together afterwards. First, I'd like to just explain what a digital worker is. It's not that well known, especially in the public sector, but it's also known as robotic process automation, or bots. And these are basically software code that will speed up transactions. They will look at what humans do in terms of taking some data from one piece and putting it into another, a lot of cutting and pasting. And for example, you might be preparing an Excel report weekly that gathers data, financial inputs from all different sources. It could be a grants program, for example. Instead of a human opening each email each time, cutting and pasting the relevant financial data into Excel, packaging it, and forwarding it on, you can program a digital worker to do that for you every time. Digital workers follow a basic set of rules and seamlessly latches on to existing IT systems. They are getting more and more advanced with artificial intelligence capabilities, and they can do more and more work that the human won't need to do anymore. The vision of the digital worker, you can read it here, but it really does take the robot out of the human. Humans tend to know, whether they think about it or not, when they're doing something that's very routine, that could be automated, that could be a robot doing it. And they tend not to like that type of work. They're not using their minds, they're not being creative, they're not being strategic, they're not being analytical. By bringing digital workers to work side by side with human workers, you can allow the human workers to do what they're really inclined to do, that they only can do, make work more human, and let the robots handle the repetitive, mundane, robotic tasks. This vision of the digital worker aligns very well with the President's Management Agenda Priority Goal 6, which is moving from low value to high value work. Also, with artificial intelligence enabled digital workers, it's a great way for federal agencies to explore the President's executive order supporting artificial intelligence technologies. Now, when I came from a financial job in the public sector, I really thought anything digital or anything IT was a major investment. I was thinking in terms of major ERP systems like Oracle or SAP. And digital workers are very different from that. First of all, you don't need to replace any of your current IT systems or any of your current processes. The programming is very low code, so your current IT staff can be quickly trained to build their own digital workers. And of course, government security standards are enormously important, and digital workers meet FISMA requirements. Second, it's easy to budget for. These investments are considered non-major, so they need less paperwork and less OMB oversight than major IT investments. They are good candidates for working capital funds, other transaction authorities, and or research funds. A lot of agencies we saw can be able to adjust it that same year without having to do an out-year budget planning process. The investment isn't that significant in some cases. Finally, digital workers can be purchased using existing contracts in many cases, using a modification to automate some of those process steps. Or you can use a small disadvantaged business partners or on existing schedules. And as a proof point for how easy it is to deploy, one government health agency was able to deploy 97 digital workers in 5 months, which saved them lots of money and lots of time. Next, digital workers really provide high value. There is a real-time ROI tracker built in, so you can actually see how your dollars saved and hours saved are by how much bots you're using. The private sector has been using digital workers over the last decade or more. That includes financial services, banking, healthcare, telecom, logistics, and manufacturing. And they've achieved lots of ROI, so these are proven areas. It does align well with citizens' expectations of always being on, being transparent, being accountable. The bot store is important because there's hundreds of pre-built digital workers that are available to be downloaded and used right off the shelf or tweaked for your specific area. And the last bullet point here is key. as you start deploying digital workers, others in your organization tend to hear about it and want to try it out for themselves. And that's why if you look at the inset box, it's so important. You need to make it easy for business users to build their own digital workers to address their particular use case. Now, I wonder if this picture looks familiar to some of you. The government spends so much money on technology to automate processes, yet 80% of the work still requires manual intervention. And this is kind of why. You have all of these data sources on the left coming in from various different modes. You may have web-based forms, Excel sheets, email, Word documents, fax, and handwritten forms that all come into the government system, which could be your customer relationship management system, your enterprise resource planning, or dozens of legacy or custom-built IT applications. And you have to have humans to make sense of it all. In some cases, you're terrified that some of your humans may retire since they're the only ones who can operate or fix some of your custom-built applications. And the results, as you can see, is low morale, lots of human error, and thousands of hours working on this. And typically, your workers don't have time to spend on the tasks that you want them to spend on, which is more strategic work. So, how can digital workers help improper payments? Well, you need to put digital workers where the need is greatest. And we know that improper payments is a great need, as we saw before. It can work on back offices or mission processes. And I'll show you here as an example of some back office processes and mission processes that are tailored for government. You can see that procurement, finance, and HR, typical back office process, are really where we're seeing a lot of progress being made with digital workers in the public sector. And as the artificial intelligence attributes become stronger and digital workers can do more and more processing, you'll see more and more mission processes show up, as we've seen in the private sector, like claims processing, inspections, grants, and casework. Now I'm going to drill into the financial processes, and here's a heat map that actually shows which common government financial processes have high robotic process automation potential, or moderate potential, or low potential. You're always going to need humans to make decisions and look into particular high-risk areas, but you should be able to have digital workers do a lot of the basic processing without involving humans if you set it up properly. You can see that in terms of budgeting, a lot of data collection can be automated. And then as far as accounting, you can categorize your expenses. You can integrate the expense report data into a centralized system, reconciliations, audit preparations, in terms of fund distributions, claims processing, data categorization. And then on revenue collection, you can data collect, do status updates, key service metrics reporting. A lot of this stuff becomes clear that if you can have a digital worker process these things in a repetitive, routine way, you can free up your human worker to do much more strategic work. Let the digital worker take care of the routine, and let the human take care of what's more strategic and creative. Now, I want to go in depth more on an improper payments use case that shows how automation can make a major difference. You recall that Medicare fee-for-service accounted for, by far, number one with a bullet, $43.3 billion in improper payments in FY16. And I'll note that it got a little better in FY18. They only had $31.62 billion that year, And a lot of that was due to some automation. But I want to kind of go over the legacy state the way it is today. And there's a lot of automated systems that are not necessarily tied together or working together well. And I'll kind of walk you through this in some detail. And I would say legacy step one, where you see electronic claims submitted. This is where the Medicare Administrative Contractor, or MAC, receives and controls the claims. Now, if these claims are submitted electronically, the MAC will process it using the front end, and you'll be able to make the claims process that way. Now, there is in the pink shaded box a prototype for an automated system to look up the required documentation. So this is an example of building a system to automate this, which is great and fine and good, but there's many systems that can't be built or that it's too complex where digital workers would fit the need, which I'll show you in a second. Step two, where the Medicare Administrative Contractor takes on, as you see some gears in that particular column, that means it's partially automated. That's where the MAC will review claims under a batch process against HIPAA and HEPS compliance. They'll validate the provider and beneficiary's eligibility, and they'll flag claims based on completeness or duplicates. Step three, which is that long, set of acronyms, is when it really gets complicated. That's where the MAC develops claims adjustments, including adjudications and verification. This typically involves lots of back and forth between the MAC and the providers. And this is where MACs would identify claims with potential integrity issues and send them to program safeguard contractors for review. Now this, just to take one instance, this is where CMS would expect the MAC to identify overpayments for medically unnecessary procedures. And this is one little area, one specific area, inpatient rehabilitation facilities, that contributed $6.7 billion to overpayments in the improper payments oversight. And so it's clear that that's really a red flag area, that the MACs and CMS is not doing a great job of correcting up front, but they find out about it later that they paid for medically unnecessary procedures. Step four, which you see under kind of the center of the column, you got another partial automation there. MAC is reviewing claim costs against Medicare provider fee schedules. This is pretty complex because costs vary obviously by service, and there's 7,200 unique codes, and it varies by zip code. So you have to do a lot of checking to see if the amounts are accurate and proper. This is Part A, and Part B have different rules and regulations that have to be followed, and there's lots of errors that get built up there. Step five, this is where you have adjustments for Medicare as a secondary payer. So the MAC would adjust claims payment amounts based on presence of other health insurance, for example. And step six, you got your CWF, HETS, final verification. Your common working file centralizes and maintains the Medicare records. Step seven, you validate the claims against the Department of Treasury's do not pay system. And step eight, you put your claims reports out for insurance companies to collect. Note, this is where there's a comprehensive error rate testing program which does a random sample of claims to determine improper payments. Now, under the automated state, you can see that digital workers could check for updated or new CMS mandates. They get adjusted all the time. You could have a digital worker reach out and make sure that it's bouncing against the proper rules and regulations. You can look at, if you look at the third one, bots or digital workers can query multiple data sets at once. It doesn't have to be so linear. You can query the HIPAA HETS system, you can query the Treasury do not pay system, NCCI. You can do all that at one time because digital workers can go a lot more places than humans can. It's not so linear at all. You have your centralized HETS record tool. It's continually being updated, and bots are tailor-made to check for updates. And then you find out which claims are worthy of further adjudication or red flag. And that is where the humans should spend their time, is uncovering some of those potential improper payments before they ever get made. Now I want to talk a little bit more about the company, Automation Anywhere, and some of our technology. Automation Anywhere is recognized as the industry leader by all the analyst firms covering this space, and the rankings are based on customer deployments. We are a high growth company. We have over 2,100 employees and continuing to grow. We have 1.5 million bots deployed throughout 90 countries and 3,100 enterprise customers. You can think of us as a major international employer in the way you can look at Uber as one of the largest transportation companies, although they don't own cars, and Airbnb is one of the largest hospitality companies without owning hotels. Automation Anywhere is one of the world's largest employers by deploying digital workers. In June 2018, Automation Anywhere received $250 million investments, which was one of the largest Series A investments in Silicon Valley history. And so we're certainly on a high growth trajectory. And our portfolio of customers shows the breadth of where digital workers add value. You can see some of the largest insurance, manufacturing, high tech, financial, and media companies use our products, and many cases have used them for many, many years. They all have a story to tell, and here's one customer's specific case study. This is the Brazilian Bureau of the Treasury. They have 34,000 users that have benefited from digital workers, and you see the bottom line there, 50% improvement in productivity for their daily report generation. They have 0 errors in reports. That's got to look good for anybody focused on improper payments. What does the technology do? Well, it's the only digital workforce provider that has 3 core technologies all integrated into a single suite. We have the core robotic process automation on the left, which does the basic functionality and processes. This has been around for over a decade and it's gotten better and better as we go along. The second column is our cognitive RPA, which allows for unstructured data to be processed smoothly. And our product's called IQBot, and it handles unsupervised learning, supervised learning, semi-structured data, fuzzy logic, neuro-linguistic programming. And our final leg of this stool is the Bot Insight product, which I mentioned earlier. It actually tracks real-time ROI as you go about. The more bots you use, the more time and money you saved. Why do enterprises prefer Automation Anywhere? It is the only provider with the intelligent digital workforce platform built in. It's got native cognitive skills, embedded operational business analytics. It's intuitive to use and fastest to scale. This is really important if you're looking at this, as I would expect you to be from a government perspective, on an enterprise level deployment. Especially if you're dealing with improper payments, there's a lot of different systems and processes that need to be automated and cleaned up and to eliminate those errors. And so you really need to have an enterprise scale system. How do you do that? Well, if it's easy enough to use for a business user to program her or his own bots, that's the key. If you have to call IT and say, I need you to fix this bot, it's not quite right, or it does something and I want to add something else to it. If it's that hard, it's going to slow down the whole process, and it's going to be very, very slower to scale that way. Automation Anywhere also has the first and only marketplace for bots, those 500 plus pre-built bots that helps you get a jump on things, so you don't have to start from scratch in most cases. And as far as the enterprise controls, you do have centralized controls. I mean, some of my government memories, my horror memories, are having proliferations of email systems or websites or SharePoint sites or servers, all of which were kind of run independently and separately, and it made it very challenging to understand what was really going on from an enterprise perspective. And you really need security, and it's bank grade security. We have a lot of some of the world's largest banks as customers of ours, and they feel confident and comfortable transacting their money around using our digital worker systems. So that goes very well with government security requirements. Now, how might you get started? Well, number one, please reach out and have myself or somebody on our team come by and expand the discussion, especially if you get a room filled with business users as well as technology experts. You can have a fairly rich discussion of what are the benefits of digital workers, as well as what are some of the technology requirements to get it into government networks, authorities to operate, etc. And we would be very happy to discuss those particular situations with you. In terms of a process workshop, a lot of government folks come to us and say, well, you know, we think we want some digital workers. We're not really sure which processes make sense to start first with. And we have a process workshop that takes maybe half a day, where we go through the various processes of your particular agency, maybe an improper payment, start to finish series of processes, which ones should be automated and how should they be done. That's a very healthy exercise, and it tends to open up a bunch of different new thought processes along this way. And that could be done maybe a half day on site at the government agency. And finally, a little more involved would be a botathon or a proof of concept being set up. And that could be done 1 or 2 days on site. And we would look at really looking at programming some basic digital workers around some dummy data on the network to show exactly how might this be used in a realistic scenario, in a realistic environment. We do it in a sandbox or a beta test, but just to get government comfortable with the value here and what it could really do in terms of transforming a lot of manual, human-oriented processes into a lot more automation going forward. And the other thing is the botathon. This is a great way to bring some of your technologists in your agency to the table and let them explore the software and start seeing how they might build bots and how it might tie directly into their daily activities, and how they might how easy it is that they could see how it is to develop these things and get them up and running. And so that's where we kind of found some real believers that kind of see how simple it is and how easy it is to get this thing rolling, and they start mapping the possibilities with the practical applications. and it's pretty cool to see. What do the customers say? First 6 months, we deployed 100 robots with cost savings of 40%. ANZ Bank. Automation Anywhere helped achieve financial recurring value in less than 15 months. Synergy. 45,000 hours saved in the first 12 months alone. Symantec. Spread like wildfire. Robust security. Simple plug and play. Don't listen to us, listen to what the customers say. Now, I wanted to save some time. Go be great. That's our tagline. That's our motto as a corporation. Wanted to save a little time for some questions. And so happy to take any questions that you guys may have had. Thank you.
Hi, Keith. Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you so much, Keith. It does look like we have a few questions. So let's get through as many of them as we can. For the first question, what kinds of return on investment are there for these sorts of automation?
Yeah, commercially, I've seen ROI as high as 1,300%, and that was a private bank that was using digital workers for a variety of their different processes. They had saved 127,000 hours freed up and 11,000 days saved. So that's always been the number one that I've seen. There may be better, higher, but that's high enough in my opinion. I did see, and they saved on procurement cost and new revenue growth as well. So they've been at it for a long time to get that kind of ROI. That healthcare government agency, they're not looking quite as cost savings, but they do look at time savings, and they were able to save 20-something thousand hours in redundant processing or manual processing that had been shifted to automation. So that's 21,000 hours. That gives you a lot. That gives you some extra FTE to deal with on much more value-added strategic activities. And they're seeing that in less than 5 months of deploying all those bots.
Great. So for our next question, what happens to the workers whose tasks get automated?
Yeah, this is something that I think before the first time I had heard about this, I thought it might be a challenge because workers feel like, well, you're automating me out of a job, but that's not necessarily the case. It's really not often the case. Like I said, this company's been around for 15 years, and we've seen what happens after you automate a particular work environment. And it doesn't necessarily mean people are out of jobs. Their jobs shift. And there is a study by the World Economic Forum that predicts the evolution of technology will create 58 million net new jobs over the next 4 years. And we've actually did a study and did a survey of workers in automated workplaces, and 38% are more engaged than their peers in non-automated areas. And they also said 70% say automation has improved morale. And those who've been around the government for a while know that the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey shows that morale is something that really needs more focus and attention. And so if this can help workers' morale because it takes the burden of the routine, mundane process off their shoulders and lets them do the work they were really generally hired to perform, that's a good thing all the way around.
Great. Another question we have, can organizations share bots that are already working elsewhere?
Yes, absolutely. We think this is probably one of the more important things that's out there. You got to realize, especially in the public sector, you're not first here, and there's an advantage to not being first. There are a lot of digital workers that have already been built by others that you can absolutely download and start using, or maybe just take it and tweak it slightly. So maybe you're 90% of the way there instead of trying to start from scratch. And that speeds everything along, and that brings a lot of momentum to the fore. We have a bot store that's actually, you can actually look up bots by which technologies they're designed around. So you can look at bots that work well with SAP systems or Oracle systems or Microsoft, Workday, Salesforce, etc. So you can search by the actual integration that it goes with, or you can search by business process. So we have bots built for, finance and accounting. We have bots built for HR, bots built for IT. So that will help. That should be a starting point. Anytime you start building a bot, you should go to that library, see what already exists, and start from there.
Perfect. For our last question, what type of training is required for people to start using bots?
We actually have a university, online university for various training levels. It's called Automation Anywhere University, and it's online. You can go there today and start learning how to build your own bots using a trial version or a community version, we call it, of software. So you don't have to do anything more than that. Just kind of register, start playing with it, learning on your own with videos or with the community. A lot of people learn, kind of like the YouTube model. If you're trying to repair your car, you go on YouTube and see how you do it. This is kind of the same story. You go on there and you say, well, I'm trying to build a bot for this, and then you get a lot of people chiming in of advice on how you should do it. If you really want to get more serious about it, we do have a certification program, which requires a variety of classes to take, and then you can get fully certified in bot building. And that's for the more serious developer. So you can go on it from, if you're just kind of a light touch, just learning about it and kind of want to tinker with it and just brag to your kid that, hey, I built a bot today. That's great. Or if you really want to go in deep, we have that available as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Keith. That looks like that's all the questions we have for right now. So if anyone has any other questions, please don't hesitate to follow up with us via the email that you received from your webinar invite. And I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us today. And please know that this webinar is being recorded and will be sent to all of our registrants and attendees. So thank you so much again, and have a great day.
Thank you.